This is Craig with Carshalton Advisory, and I'm launching a new video tutorial series covering the Excel 2016 Expert Curriculum. Download the file linked in this video's description to follow along as we review Section 1.1, Manage Workbook Options and Settings. Let's get started. So with your 1.1 workbook open, the first thing we're going to learn about is how to save a workbook as a template. So what Excel allows us to do is to create a gallery of frequently used templates. And this way we don't have to create a new workbook from scratch each and every time. So if you have a particular way you like to work with workbooks or a particular format that you're regularly using, you can save your document as a format. Then the next time you need to use it again, you don't have to create it right from scratch. You just open up your template and it's ready to go for you. So let's create one here. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Control N to open up a new workbook. I'm just going to arrange mine so we can see it here on the screen. Now, I have this new workbook here open. Let's say I really like working with, not yellow cells, let's go light gray cells on a blank background, and I want my text to be white. So we'll do that here, making our font white and bold. So now when I'm working, this is what my workbook is going to look like. And every time I use this, I don't want to have to start and repeat that process. So I'm going to save this as a template. And I can do that by hitting F12 for Save As. Once I've done this, the important thing is this Save As type here. So if we click on this and scroll down to Excel Template, okay, what I'm going to do is call this Gray Template. And you'll notice up here in the locations, so this is now in a specific location, which gathers all of my templates together, and I'll show you why that's valuable here. So we'll hit Save, and now I have this template ready to go for the next time I need it. So I'm going to close that out, and now tomorrow's come along and I need to use that template again. So I am going to access it by hitting Alt F for File and for New, and E in this case for my personal templates. And you'll notice the first one on the list here is this gray template. So when I click on this, here's the template that I had just fixed. Or created, and it's ready to go for me. The other thing you're going to notice is the name here. So they've called this Gray Template 1. So actually what Excel's done is it actually hasn't opened that template that I created. It opened a copy. So now when I change this and save it, my original template is still in place, and I haven't changed or modified it at all. Next, we're going to Control Page down to go to our Ribbon tab and learn about how to hide and display ribbon tabs. So our ribbon is this section across the top here. Now I have mine collapsed. I'll open it up here so that everyone can see what we're talking about. So with Excel, we actually have the ability to change and modify what is shown up here at the top. So what we're going to do is hit Alt F to go to File, T for Options, and C should take us down to Ribbon. There we go. All right, so on our right-hand side here, we can see all of kind of the default or the standard ribbon tabs. Some things that you may want to make sure, if you're going to be doing macros, you want to make sure this developer tick box is closed or is turned on, that toggle. But what I find kind of additionally valuable is the ability we can actually create new tabs and in fact new ribbons as a whole. But let's go to our Home tab. I'm going to expand that here, and what I want to do is add a new group in here, and I'm going to move that up into the Home. I can rename this, and I'm going to call it Craig. Click OK. And so now what I can do is I can actually add new commands. So if there's certain commands that I use a whole lot but aren't easily accessible, so I can filter down to commands that are not normally in the ribbon. And so these are things that you normally can't access through there. So for example, if I use a lot of down arrows, I can add that into my ribbon. If I, let's see what else we can get here. If we want, oh, here we go, connectors with an elbow arrow. I want to add that. And we'll go one more here. Exponentation sign. You never can use that too often here. So now watch what happens when I click OK. So now in my ribbon on the Home tab, I now have those commands quickly accessible for me. So what I can do now, if I'm using my Alt shortcuts, which you know I like to do, so if I hit Alt, I'm going to hit H for the Home tab. And now, up here where you can see all the letter shortcuts, now I can actually get an arrow, this connector elbow arrow, or an exponentation sign just by using these shortcuts. So if I go Y and 1, now I can draw my down arrow quick and easy. So let's go Alt H, and now I want Y2. So I'm going to draw a connector 1. There it is. Great. And let's do Y3. And there's my exponent sign for me. So quick and easy. Now, I understand you're probably not going to need to use a down arrow a whole lot, but Excel does give you the flexibility to set up your ribbon in a way that provides the maximum amount of efficiency for the way that you work. Next, let's go to our next tab here for enabling macros. So by default, there is a security setting on Excel so that it doesn't automatically open a macro that's in a file that's sent to you, but we can modify that. So let's go to Alt F and T for options. We're gonna go to T again for Trust Center. And then what we can do over here where it says Trust Center Settings, if you notice underneath that T there's an underscore. What that means is now I can Alt and T, and that will open up that dialog box for me. So let's go up to macro settings, which is an M, and here are our options here. And so the top one is the most secure, the bottom one is the least secure. So the top one, if someone sends you a file with a macro, Excel doesn't let the macros run, and it doesn't tell you that it's shut it down. So the next one is to disable the macros, but it will give you that kind of yellow bar across the top saying, hey, there was macros in here, but we've not turned them on. So you have to opt in effectively in order to allow the macros to run. The next is to disable all unless they're digitally signed. So this is kind of an independent verification that it's a macro that you can trust. Last is the option to enable all macros. And as they state that they wouldn't recommend this. So with VBA coding, it's actually quite powerful and flexible in what you can do with it. So a malicious actor could decide to create a macro that would run in the background, and it could damage your data. It could send information back to their computer. It could do a lot of things if you're not prepared or protected for it. So it's probably better to use one of the disable options in order to make sure that you're keeping Excel as secure as you can. We'll exit out of here. And the next thing we can do is to copy macros. With copying macros, if you've not recorded a macro before, we'll quickly go through the process. So let's record a macro. So what we're going to do is open up our template, which is Alt F-N-E, and then Z1 gives us our gray template. I'm just going to arrange it here so that we can see it a little bit easier, everyone. All right, so now let's record our first macro. And in order to start recording, what we're going to do is go onto our Developer tab. I want you to toggle this option here, which says Use Relative References. So we are going to click on that. Make sure yours is shaded and looks somewhat like mine does here. And now when we want to start recording, we can either click on the box here to start recording, or we can use our keyboard shortcuts, which again are Alt, L for Developer, R to start recording, and we're going to type in our macro name. So we're going to call this confirmed. And so let's imagine that we have a a supervisor that wants us to check a bunch of inputs in a workbook, and then so they know that we've looked at them, they want us to put confirmed and our initials so that that we kind of endorse that we've done that. Now we found that it takes a lot of time to type confirmed and our initials, and so we'd like to speed it up with a shortcut. So we'll tab to the shortcut key section, and I'm going to hit the shift key and then the letter C, C for confirmed, and then we will put in our description that this is types confirmed and initials into active cell. All right, and so as soon as we click OK, I don't want to click on any cell in the worksheet, because otherwise what Excel does is it assumes that we want to click into that particular cell. And so we want to do it in the one that's active. So all we're going to do is go into the menu bar here. We are going to type in confirmed, the formula bar, confirmed, a hyphen, and our initials. You don't have to use my initials. You can use your own, of course. And then I'll just hit tab at the end to exit out of the cell. Now to stop, we could hit this square now in the record button's location, or again use our keyboard shortcuts of Alt, L, and R. And so I can check and make sure that this has stopped recording. It's happened to me before, and I'm sure it's happened to most people that record macros, as you forget to turn off your recorder, and you find out 5 or 10 minutes later that Excel's been recording everything that you've been doing and translating into VBA code, which doesn't do you a whole lot of good. So let's check and make sure that this worked. So I'm going to click on any new cell. And when I run this by hitting Control-Shift-N, it should type in that same phrase. And not only that, it should tab to the next cell to the right. So let's check this out and see what happens here. That's right. C, I was typing in the N. So it's Control-Shift-C for my shortcut. And because I put it in my macro workbook, if I go into this active worksheet, let's test it out and see if this works. Sure enough, so it's now in both workbooks for me, or available in any workbook that I have open. All right, so now what we want to do is copy our macro. All right, and so I've tucked the instructions in over here. So what we're going to do now is hit Alt and the F11 key, and this is going to bring up our VBA window, and I'll rearrange mine so that it's viewable. That's the wrong one here. All right, now you can see what's going on here. All right, so what we can do is see in this personal workbook section here, there's a couple modules, and modules are where your macros get stored. So every day, at least as far as I've been able to figure it out, any day when I record new macros, there's a new module created. So depending on how many days you've been working on creating modules, you may have 1, you may have 2, you may have 20, I don't know. But we're going to double click it to open it up. And so when we open it up, we actually can see the VBA code for what we did. So here's the name that we typed in. Here's the description of what we called it. And here's what the shortcut key was. Now, these are comments. And you can tell they're comments, one, because they're a green color, but also because of this single apostrophe that's at the beginning of the sentence, or at the beginning of the line. Anytime that's at the beginning of the line, the actual Excel ignores that while it runs the macro. So it's there for the user, not so much for Excel. And so you can see here the actual code that we've created. So you can see here that, all right, so in the active cell, it's going to type in what's in between the quotation marks. And if you want to test this out, what you can actually do is you could change this. So if you want to, instead of saying confirmed, let's say you want to say this is okay, and still have your initials. And I have it so that afterwards it tabs and goes 1 column to the right. If you wanted it to go 3 columns to the right, we could change that from 1 to 3. And so now it's going to go 3 columns to the right. So let's save this. And what we want to do is copy this to a different workbook. So let's say I want to have it in my gray template. I'm going to send it to a friend because I want them to be able to use it, what I can do is just click this module and drag it into the other project. And sure enough, there's my module 2. I can open it up and there is the code. So we can close this. And now let's just do a quick check and see what happens if our manipulation of VBA code has been successful. Control-Shift-C. Oh, and sure enough, it's now typing this is okay and jumps 2 to the right. So you've recorded a macro, you've edited the VBA code, which is something that a lot of Excel users never get around to, and we've copied it into a new workbook. Lastly, we're going to move on to our structured reference tab, and I'm going to hit Control Page Down. Or excuse me, this is referencing data in another workbook. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, mostly because I'm not a huge fan of doing this. But what we can do is bring data that's exists in another workbook and put it in our current one. So to give you an example, I can hit equals on this workbook. Now I can go into my other workbook that I have open, which is that module 1, and let's say I want to bring in that value here. I would now hit enter, and sure enough, there is the value from my other workbook. And what we can do is when we click on this, so we're going to see the value, and typically what it is I have it highlighted here. It's the path, the workbook's name in square brackets, then the sheet name, and then the cell or the row and column reference. So because they're both open at the same time, there's no path here currently, but that will change when I close the other workbook. Here is the name of the workbook, Gray Template 1. The sheet name was Sheet 1. There's an apostrophe and an exclamation mark, and then the cell and row reference. So basically all it's doing is it's following that path to get to the other document. So if let's save this, and public documents, temp 1, we'll save. All right. So sure enough, there's my temp 1 saved. Let's close this, and there's my path now. So see, users, public documents, all the way to sheet 1. So this can be handy if that information in that cell in that workbook changes. That will actually get updated the next time I open this one up. So it can be handy, but the challenge is because the file path is part of the formula. If the file path changes or the document name changes, all of a sudden you get links that no longer work. And then every time you open the document, you're going to get a dialog box that says, hey, it can't find the links. Do you want to just use the old information, or do you want to try and find it again? So I'm going to generally suggest that you don't link to other workbooks. It's possible, and I had to show you how to do it, but try not to. Until you're really, really comfortable with how it works and how to prevent the problems that exist. But I will help you out in how to find an annoying link. Because so often you get sent a document from someone else and you want to keep using it, but every time you open it up, it starts up with this message box that it's not a lot of fun to get through. So how do you find an annoying link? So 90% of the time, you can find the links by just doing a find. So that's Control F. And what you want to find is an open square bracket. Okay? And we know that's always there because in our path, always has the workbook name in a square bracket. So if I hit Find All here, sure enough, it has found 2 versions of it. One is in this formula, and one is obviously in this cell right here. So now I'm like, oh, there's the one I want. I can go to that cell and delete that link and change it into something else. Alternatively here, instead of the open square bracket, if you search for .xl and then an asterisk, and the reason for that is in this case, this was a .xlsx, but but those last two might change. It might be an XLT, it might be an XLB. So by doing .xl and then an asterisk, it covers you for any of those circumstances. So 90% of the time, that will find your link for you. 5% of the time, if it's still doing that and you don't find any more of those, what you can do is check your name manager. So Alt-M for formulas and for name manager, and this will show you all the named cells in the current workbook. And so in this case, there are no names, but often what you'd find is refers to. In this refers to area, you would see the path and the file name for that other workbook. And then you can delete that or redirect it to get rid of that option for stray links. And I've put here 3%. Very rarely there'll be a conditional formatting that you would set in there, and then it had been copied from another workbook, and it's still trying to refer back to that old workbook. Now this is a harder bug to catch because it doesn't really give you any clue which conditional formatting formula has the problem. But if you can, often thinking this helps you recall that, oh yeah, I have conditional formatting in this section. Let me go check that out. I've left 2% blank because, 2% of the time it's just really tough to figure out. And unfortunately, I can't give you a whole lot of advice how to get there. Thanks. Lastly, we're going to recover how to do structured references within Excel. And so I've created a table here, and the table is named sales. So we don't need to worry about naming it. We can confirm that by going into the Table Tools contextual menu up here at the top. And when we click on that, we can see here that here is our table name. What that allows us to do is to abbreviate some of our formula writing. And the other thing it does is that it'll make sure that if the table gets increased in size, that whatever the new values are, they're also going to be integrated into the formula that we've created. So let's take a look here in row 37. So what I've shown here is let's type in this formula inside the box here. So what we're going to do is a count formula. So we can type equals and then COU. And since count is highlighted, we can just tab to integrate that. Now all we need to do is start typing in our table name. And when we do that, you'll see right in this section that there is our table has already been highlighted for us. I'll hit tab to integrate that, hit enter. And now what that's done is that's counted all of the cells that have numeric data inside that table. And so I've put a little comment here just so you can see exactly what that formula is going to do for us. For our next one, we're going to use a count if, and what we're going to do is count, and then I can tab or arrow down to the count if, hit a tab to integrate it. My range again is going to be our table sales. I'll tab to bring that in, and then what I need to do is include the criteria. And in this case, we're going to do East. And what will happen is Excel is going to take a look inside of our table and tell me how many of the ones say East. So total of 13 cells say East. Next, we're going to use a max function. So what we're going to do now is type max to get our formula. And then what we will do is the first thing we need to do is type our table. So sales. Now this time, what we want to do is we only want to check one column. So I'm going to use a square bracket. Now it's taking a look inside our table and it's identified all of the columns that we have. So we could go to unit cost just by hitting U down to unit cost, tab to bring it in. I do have to put a close square bracket and then I can hit enter. You can see down here in my table that only that single column is highlighted when I do this. So when I hit enter, it's now found in that single column the amount that is largest. And so we can take a quick peek, and sure enough, there is the value that it's found. Again, if we add another row to this column, we'll go central. We'll add a name here that, let's go another desk. And we want to have 15 units. And now if I add a larger value here, so let's go to 80. All right, and then back up to the top to where we're at. You'll notice that this formula has automatically updated. I haven't had to make any changes to it, and it has now shown us the new value. So lastly, we'll use a sum, so equals sum. And we just want to use the one column. We're going to use sales table, square bracket, and we want to use the total column. Tab that, square bracket to close. We'll hit enter. And so there is now our total of all the sales in that column. Just another example of how to use a table, and we want to add a tax column to the table. So I've named this cell GST. In fact, it's not named, so I will do that right now. We'll call that GST, which is a tax that we have to deal with where I live. And so if I want to create a formula, what I can do is let's add the tax, or excuse me, multiply the total to find out the tax. So we'll go equals. Now when I go into the table, you've noticed that it's created a structured reference for me already, meaning that it's going to multiply times whatever is in the total column. And we will add a multiplication sign, and then we'll use our named cell, which is GST. It pops up on my list, and hit enter. And now two things will happen. It adds a new column, and it does all the math for us. So we now have a column that has our tax value based on each of the cells that's in the table. I haven't had to do any formatting. It was all done automatically. Thanks for watching this overview of Section 1.1. Stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe so that you'll know when we get the next video posted, hopefully in the next week or so here. Thanks so much for watching. This is Craig with Carshalton Advisory.